Let us shed all the worries of the day, all our concerns, all our sadness, all our fears, whatever they may be linked to, and let us just talk about art and what makes art good and what we need to do to make our art better. And you're in the safety of a classroom, so it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to suck. There's no better place to suck than in a classroom. And let's get started. Couple of announcements. Portrait Studio is going to be on sale in a little bit over a week. So if you want Portrait Studio, which is a reference generation software, you build your references in the software. That's what it is. If you haven't heard about it yet, it's all over my channel. You can go to my store. Currently it's at a little bit less than $100, but it will be at 55% off, up to 55% off this coming sale, starting on the 1st of November. Possibly for the entirety of November, but at least until the 14th, it'll be on sale, at least 50% off. So for anyone who wants it for their New Year's resolutions, it's an amazing study tool. It's an amazing referencing tool. It helps you build environment scenes. It has environment assets in it, as well as a posable mannequin to pose any kind of figure you need. It really is the go-to, like, central hub of referencing. A lot of our professionals in the audience use it, and I have lots of videos on how to use it, what it's all about, and examples of people who have used it and how I've used it myself. And if you want to find those videos, you just go to my YouTube page and you scroll down, and it's all here if you want a little bit more information on what Portrait Studio is all about. And it'll be on sale from the 1st of November to the 14th. Currently, there is a Reddit community challenge. It's a Halloween challenge. It's a character design lineup, line art, minimally rendered. So not rendered at all, actually, just cell shades. And it is our ghoulish character design lineup. Classical Halloween characters changed or altered in a way and redelivered with a unique take or twist. So you guys can join in our next... I'm so sorry, I'm very sick, if you guys can't tell. In our next challenge, which is going to start on the 1st of November, and I'll upload the resource pack for that on the 1st of November. And that will be a character design illustration, so full rendering, like a book cover illustration. And it'll be a classical Christmas character, but you have to take a unique take on it. Which means that it's basically, and I'm announcing it right now, it's Santa Claus, but as a wizard. Oh God, am I telling? Anyway, it's Santa Claus, but a wizard, right? Wizard Santa Claus. I don't know if everybody else is laughing. I don't know why it's suddenly funny to me. I think it's the Dayquil. But, but Santa Claus is fighting some shit, alright? He's doing his final spell, and it's a crazy action scene, book cover illustration. I don't know why I'm laughing so hard. And, damn it, I can't even look at the chat. Basically, Santa Claus is just like going at it, and he's casting a spell with his wand and his staff, and that's what you guys are going to be Exactly, like Santa Claus, like Gandalf or Dumbledore, but Santa Claus, okay? Alright, so I don't want to see no happy jolly Santa on a sleigh. He's more like Saint Nick as a wizard. It's like Merlin. Okay, so I'm going to be putting up some resource packs very soon about all that. I don't know why this is so funny, god damn it. Abu, do you mind getting me some tissues? Yeah, so that'll be great. I have some resource packs. The resource packs will help illuminate the subject, the kind of environment I'm expecting in the illustration, the kind of color palette, the kind of time of day, that type of stuff, like the exact nature of the spell battle. But it's gonna be one hell of an illustration. It just seems so silly. Santa Claus. Okay. And final little announcement is Patreon. If you guys want to join me on Patreon as watchers, you don't have to join in the higher tiers. You don't have to join in the $10 or $20 expensive tiers, though you do get a lot of educational material in exchange for them. So the $20 tier, you get to be part of our community on Discord, and you get monthly assignments, and they're really, really cool. They range from all kinds of topics, for all kinds of skill levels. There is no minimal skill level. Anyone can join our Patreon. It tailors to everyone. And it's just a really, really relaxed way of making sure you get work done every single month. So it's not as intensive as my private tutoring, but it is an equivalent to this community, but with a little bit more accountability. As a watcher, there's a reason why I call the $1 tier a watcher. You guys watch over the community. Just joining as a $1. If everyone in this stream joined as a $1 patron, I wouldn't need to announce Patreon at the beginning of every stream like next year. Look, if by next year we reach our goal of 1,000 patrons, it's really going to help my day-to-day, and it's going to help keep the community really, really strong. If there is like $1 coming in from every single viewer, it means that these viewers are active viewers. They're actively from their own pocket supporting the continuation of Critique Hour at like 2 sessions a week. That's a lot, and it's really, really amazing that, you know, that so many of you have joined already, and it's just I can't imagine where we'll be in a year, but I hope to not need to announce Patreon within the next 6 months. I hope we reach our goal by 6 months. But yeah, I hope that, you know, if you guys want to deal with the checkout on Patreon, if you guys want to help out, give back, and keep the community supported and keep it strong, then you guys can join as $1 patron. There's no pressure to join in the higher tiers. I've never asked until this year for more, because YouTube has for some reason completely shut down my channel. And notifications don't go out. Videos aren't recommended anymore. It's really, really weird. Old videos are not recommended. People don't get notifications for my streams. It's really, really weird. New videos don't get sent out, and my viewers aren't notified. So I don't really go around asking people to like my videos or subscribe. I do go around asking people to recommend my videos for those who need them, and that's definitely been happening. But if you guys, I don't work with a marketing team or any agency or anything like that, so if you guys want to support and keep this community strong, independent, you can do that with Patreon. Okay, let's get started. I'm so sorry about that burst of laughter I had. That was ridiculous. I'm going to look at these studies, and then maybe I'm going to hop into Reddit and look for some 14-day challengers. Let me see if I can do 14-day challengers first. So the 14-day challenge, for those who don't know what it is, I'm sure everybody in the world right now knows what the 14-day challenge is. It's drawing a portrait for 14 days straight, ideally. Sometimes people do 2 days per portrait. Everyone works differently, and I don't like asking students to time themselves, because the point is that you're supposed to take as long as you need to. It's like, you don't time the first time well, you do, but you don't rush it to try to speed up the first time you go up a flight of stairs after an injury. You just see how long it took you, period. And then as you train, then you start timing yourself each time to make sure, or rushing yourself so that you can push and train. So the first day, first 2 days, first 3 days, you can take 48 hours per post. And you should all post them on Reddit so that you can get feedback, because you can't go on to the next day unless you get a critique on the first day or the day before. So make sure that you guys are actively looking for critique. If you critique other people in the community, they will critique you. People are like that. They talk to those who talk to them. So don't say, oh, nobody's looking at my work. No, people will look at your work. So there are a couple 14-day challenges from the past that I've wanted to take a look at. And a couple posted here today that have a couple of problems. A couple of this, a couple of that. So this one is a bit problematic, because it's basically a day 1 14-day challenge that you try to turn into a portrait. So I want to take a look at that, because you should not be trying that until you graduate it. This one is good. But you have, and it looks fine, but I think depending on beauty standards, to get away with some rendering issues with detail. So I'm going to be taking a look at those if I have some time. Alright. let's talk about these eye studies, because something is off with them, and I'm going to teach you guys how to find that thing that's off. I have a cold, so I'm just going to take some breaks to just blow my nose and stuff. Damn it. Excuse me. Okay, so the problem with these is the student is getting a good hold over what they're bringing back from their reference. And at the moment, unless they recorded their process for me, I would not be able to tell whether or not they depended heavily or relied heavily on their reference. But based off some of the mistakes they made, it doesn't seem like they copied too closely or traced. But let's talk about some of the issues here, because the student sees them, I see them, and we don't know why, but the result, your version, the painted version, looks weird. So I'm going to block out some areas, all right? And they can only really be seen once we zoom out. And I want somebody in the audience to describe what it is that I'm doing. All right, and I'm just blocking areas. Okay. And what I'm doing right now is exactly what happens in my head when I do photo references. Or just, you know, whatever, when I use references for anything. So what exactly am I pointing to? Can anyone describe it? If you're answering the question, at Istabrak so that the comment can be highlighted. Okay. What am I doing? So let's compare this to this, this to this, this to this. Okay. So, face diagram, blocking the anatomy planes, shadow mapping, draw over diagram. No. She's blocking the areas with the same values. No, not trace over diagram. All right, focus on the question, please. And don't get discouraged by the critique. I know it may sound harsh at times, but we are a loving community, and all we want is to help each other. So it's never ill-willed. Excellent, honey. That's. I agree with that. That's right. Volume. Blocking the planes of the face. So that's good blocking. This isn't a trace over diagram. A trace over diagram is when you find the eyeball, you find the eyelids and how they wrap, you find all the planes and color code them, and then you give everything a grid line or mesh to help you find the volume. Right, so that's a trace over diagram. That's not a trace over diagram. Looking for planes and edges. Finding the geometry. Contour. Contour is a good example. Yeah, that's a good word. That's going in the right direction. What I'm doing right now is selecting very similar areas in the, like exactly the same areas in the painting, and finding some alien invented shadows or just missing shadows altogether. So look at this one and this one. So when we block and separate each area from the other, and basically what I'm doing is this. Alright, I'm going to grab this section and paste it, and then grab that exact same section from the reference and put it beside it. Okay, so when stuff looks good, but it still looks weird and off and bad, so this may look good to someone who just started drawing, but for someone who's a little bit more advanced than you, it looks messy, looks a little bit splotchy and underblended, it looks a little bit hacked together. Edges where they don't need to be, no softness, no gradual organic transition in radial values. It looks very oily, very mucky. And that's because Sometimes you're inventing your own values and you're completely missing out on some of the more essential cast shadows with soft brush. You have no delicacy with your application of gradients at all. Something is either dark or not dark. For instance, take a look at the radial shade in this big teardrop, and you have none of it here. Right, this is a big teardrop of value. And again, if all else fails, select the photograph and select the one you do. I'm just going to select it a little bit bigger. And just put them beside each other and look at the difference. So this is smaller, so this would be like that. It's a completely different kind of language you're telling me, but it's the same exact object. So these are the kind of critiques we give advanced students because we don't want them to get away with any of their mistakes, because it's unforgivable when you're missing the use of a gradient. And then there's the eyeballs. The eyeballs that you're doing. I don't know what's with these eyeballs. And what's with the lashes? Why are you depending so much on lashes to pull the read of this piece? So in both of these eyes, you have no thickness to the lash and the eyelid. The eyelid is like a thick thing. It's not just a paper thin object that sits on top of an eyeball. It's thick. It sits on top of the eyeball and has a thickness to it, and the lashes grow out on multiple levels along this exterior thickness. As you can see, they have different starting points. And when we're zoomed out enough, that thickness is just interpreted as a thick line. And you don't have that line on either side. See how it's interpreted as a thick line? Because that's the lashes layering in front of each other. And you don't have that here. And the inner thickness of the waterline as well. Another thing that you've missed. And something about the way you've drawn the eyes, we've lost the eyeball shape in the eyes. For some reason, the eyeball isn't red. So it could be due to the fact that the thickness in the lashes here was missing. Or you just depended too much on the lashes, and the lashes are kind of reading as lines. Whenever you have a beautifully painted organic object and you did everything perfectly, let's say this is the most 3D organic object you've ever painted. If you throw a bunch of lines at the top, really, really dark lines, like let's just say it's growing some hair, this is going to look under-rendered and underdone, even though by all standards, this was perfect. The rest of the organic shape. That's because anything compared to a line will fail as a focal point. And so everything that your whole eye is a focal point. The entire eye, the eyelids, the eye socket, the eyebrow hair, the lashes as a secondary means, like a tertiary means of attaining detail. All of that is the focal point. But when you've drawn your eyes, because it's an eye study, you decided that there's going to be a focal point in the focal point, which is wrong. The entire eye is the focal point, which is why in my paintings and a lot of other paintings you'll find the lashes are almost never included. Okay, what other things can I point to that are absolutely wrong? The whites in the eyes, you're kind of going overboard with them. So it seems like you really want that edge to be sharp around the pupils. And then you have the shape of the pupils and the reflection in the eyes. I'm sure you've seen like a couple of photo reference pieces and you've got this pent-up desire to really show as much reflection as you can in the pupil and iris, and on the pupil and iris. And I'm telling you, when you zoom out and do character design, you're not going to be drawing little pictures inside the pupils. You're going to have the most minimal representation of the reflection in the eye. Sometimes we're so zoomed out, blue eyes can look like brown eyes because there just isn't enough light exposed on top of the eye to reveal the color. Absolutely, there was an over-reliance on the lashes. Absolutely. And then there was just a really, really weak way of representing texture without overdoing texture. For instance, the eyebrows are not represented with a more painterly kind of like finesse in representing the texture. You have no big blocks anywhere. And we talked about this last class, how you're supposed to prioritize the geometry. Well, prioritizing the geometry of the texture is also a thing. You find the block or the general behavior and of that texture and block it in respect to its, you know, whatever it's, however it's behaving. So the brush moves along the texture's grain or behavior, and that brush texture takes care of the rest. You don't need to paint every single hair and then blur the rest, because you're working with a really, really dangerous attitude when it comes to photorealism. And then I'm just going to smudge under here. So you need to start making your own texture anatomy in your mind. You need to start inventing your own way of doing eyebrows, and it's usually the same way everybody else does it, but you need to discover that on your own. You need to know which details can I sacrifice, where the eyebrow will still look great from a distance, but it is still based off a reference. So what I'm doing right now to the eyebrows is I'm minimizing that excessive texture you had, and I'm staying zoomed out for a reason, so that we can catch these issues. And you'll see in the before and after what was happening with your piece. Okay. The pupils are kind of bigger than they should be, but I don't know why their reading is bigger. It might be that lash business that you've been doing. Yeah, it might be that. Sometimes you're over shading the white of the eye, and sometimes you're under shading it. It's a little bit hard to keep track. You have more contrast in your piece than you do in the reference. Just copy what your reference does. One of the more important, and you can only see it when you zoom out, see? See how there's a missing block of shadow right under the eyelid? And what has happened? The eyelashes have tried to take over the role of that cast shadow, and they have failed. They just don't do it. And look at how visible these lashes are from a distance compared to these lashes. So I'm just going to lighten these lashes completely, so that you're focusing on the right stuff, which will always be the core shadow. Okay? And then I'm going to, from a distance, zoom out. So what is it about painting from a distance that makes painting successful? Who can answer that question? Why do we need to see these objects from a distance? And what benefits do we have? What are we trying to avoid that we can get from zooming in too close? And I think your problem, for the artist here today, is you're way too zoomed in, buddy. So if you zoomed out, you'd see that water line, that that upper eyelid water line is way too bright. It's flat in the eye. And we're only picking that up when we zoom out. All right. Because you are focusing on the image as a whole instead of tiny details that don't help the read. Okay, what are the things that help the read? All right, so in order for us to find these soft brush, these moments for soft brush, I'm just going to red mark all the missing soft brush in your painting. And I'm going to radially apply them. Alright, so you're missing a lot here. You can see how they're all over here. So I should have painted over the piece instead. Look at how much soft brush you're missing. The more red you see, the more mistake there is. And some areas are over blended. So you're like you're in a dangerous territory right now. You're in a dangerous place in your development where, yeah, if you were to draw maybe 50 more, 100 more of these, you'll get better on your own. But you'll still have some like floppy and anatomy here and there that will come back to haunt you. A lot of the eye bag down here is missing. And that's what's keeping your work from looking realistic. That's a lot of red mark. A lot. So let me find where I started doing that. So what else can anybody add? You don't over detail if you stay zoomed out. You get a better read, and blocking is easier, which means a better structure for your anatomy and lighting. Being too focused on the details. When you zoom out, you can see all the planes of the face without the distraction of detail. Excellent. That's all I wanted to see here. Planes. You get to see the planes a lot easier, especially with diffused photographs like this. I never work with photographs like this for referencing because they're just annoying. The photographer deliberately diffused a lot of the cast shadows, and cast shadows are an artist's bread and butter, and when they're bring out the anatomy, especially if they've invented their own character and they're just borrowing the reference solely for the shadows. So references like this, the fact that the anatomy that you're depicting here is not really solid. So you have this little bump right here in the eye. Why do you have that if in your reference it's, and you have an outline under this? I mean, this eye is fine, but what you're reading in this entire section, especially male eyes, they have a very low eyebrow that hangs over the eyeball, so a very deep set eye socket structure on males. Okay, and then there's then we have a little bump there. And then we have the eyebrows a little bit earlier, finishing off a little bit closer to the inner corners. So if you're sitting there finished and wondering why your work doesn't look like the references, it's because you've zoomed in for too long and you focus on the wrong stuff. And you don't need dark lashes to pull off the anatomy. If you find yourself depending too much on them, they will look less and less natural on the face. And the only way to make a face look natural is with soft brush. Blending. That's the cylinder at the end that I talked about last class. That's the only way to make something look organic and natural is with blending. Which is why y'all are so crazy about blending. Because you guys know that very well. Students know it is all about blending at the end of the day. But that's the final punctuation of the process. It's not the only part of the process. Blending is the conclusion. And you guys skip that. Process, sorry, and go straight to the conclusion, which is really stupid because what's it going to be based off? You were missing all of your core structure. Look, I can even exaggerate this even more and it would still make sense. It would still look realistic because it was a solid plane. It was a good plane to have in the painting, which is the lower eyelid on top of it. Because this painting is, this photograph is so diffused, it's going to be so hard for you to pick it up without zooming out. And there's a shadow there. Your pupils are much bigger. The eyebrows are much darker. Okay. And this is what soft brush does. It makes things look natural. But don't go crazy getting soft brush and just only look at this eye for the before and after. Don't go grabbing soft brush and thinking you can do 100% of your process with that, because how did I critique today without my, if not with my blocking brush? Okay. Look at that difference. Look at the way you did the eyebrows. In all respects, theoretically, your work should have looked better. It should have worked. We do have every single individual lash in the real world. We do. We have a ton of lashes, and you drew a ton. So ideally, in theory, it should have worked. But why didn't it work? Because we don't see every single lash. We are weak. We have weak vision. We are humans. We are mortals. We don't see everything. Sorry, 1 minute. I'm just going to blow my nose. So yeah, we don't see everything. We see a mushed up version of things. And then after that, we, obviously we see the bigger things, which are core shadows. We're almost always zoomed out. This is more professional than this. This is more skilled than this. This probably took you more time than this. Why? Why is it like that? Why does it have to be like that? Why is it that we work so hard to grow the patience we need to draw every single lash, and it's not right? It doesn't work. That's unfair. Why does it have to be like that? We put in so much effort. Well, you're putting the effort in the wrong place, yeah, but effort is effort. It should have resulted in something, and it did. Your work isn't bad. You managed to maintain some symmetry, but really, all I'm seeing is a bunch of lines that have been blurred. Some radial shading because you may have listened to 1 or 2 classes. Tons of lashes because you didn't listen to the rest of the classes or didn't watch enough. Overdoing reflection and contrast because you were hyper while you were drawing. I'm not using that as a joke. I really mean it. Some students are hyper. They go crazy. And it's a combination of excitement, having fun, and anxiety all at the same time that makes someone want to use too much contrast. This isn't too much. No. I've seen worse. But I'm being harsh on this student because they're almost there. And you're missing some really basic, natural movement into shadow. And that shadow you had on the eyeball just dimmed the eye, made it look like it was bloodshot. It wasn't a clear eye. And there's a lot more that you can do with this painting, but why on earth does this look more natural? Because we're pulling from the things that we can see here. Some students see too much detail all at the same time, and they have to teach themselves not to see so much detail. So for those in the audience, who sees too much detail sometimes? Who's like constantly finding themselves noticing too much detail and wondering, how the frig am I supposed to not see this much detail? So if you do, just put your hand up. Yeah, humans have weak vision. Our painting should be a representation of naked eye. What the human sees, not what the camera sees. The camera sees more than a human being. A human being can only see one thing at a time. Even right now, don't freak out. But you can only see one thing at a time. And you're not even actually seeing that thing at that time. You're still seeing it with inaccuracy. Okay, so have you noticed that you only see one thing at a time? Everything else around that point is periphery. And what is the thing you look at when you talk to someone? Their eyes. Everything else is periphery. Everything else is blended. The hair, the eyebrows, the nose, the mouth are under-rendered because we're drawing as if we're seeing with the naked eye. That's the best way to draw. Photorealism comes from photos and cameras see more than the human eye. They can ingest a lot of detail. Okay, so for those who put their hand up, what do you do when you're seeing too much detail? You're the kind of student who's just seeing too much. Zoom out and draw. Okay? And there's still the problem of the iris and the pupil. They're kind of overdone. But I could forgive that because we fixed everything else. We started pointing shadows down. Do you see how the lashes dragged the attention up? Looked really unnatural, like one of those Japanese android things they're building. Those sex bots with the lashes that just grow out of nowhere. It's creepy. Oh wait, or yeah, always zoom out. Always zoom out when you have an like a abundance of attention to detail. You find yourself seeing too much all at once. You're overwhelmed. So for a lot of the students who have an attention problem, or I don't like calling it ADHD or ADD or something like that, but they get too much information too soon before they're allowed to process it. Their brain gives them more information than they are capable of processing. Any human is capable of processing. And so they freak out. And because they can't process it, they move on to something else and gain information from that. And it just keeps happening. In order to slow down the thinking of a student with ADHD, I have to tell them and force them, you can only paint with this much zoomed in. You cannot paint that much, any more than that. Because then we start going crazy. Then you start drawing every single lash and its extended family and its entire heritage, and I don't want that information. That's not the information we're looking for. All I want are the large core shadows that make something look realistic. And so that's why I force those students who have an attention problem to zoom out. It's not that they get bored, it's that they're getting too much information. They're waiting for the information to stop. It never stops. And then they're just wondering why they haven't painted yet. And they call it bored. It's not bored. You weren't bored. You were just overstimulated, and then you got bored of being overstimulated. So zoom out when you have that kind of issue. Okay? Yeah, if you don't want to zoom out, you can squint your eyes. Squinting your eye, everybody squint their eyes and compare the upper and lower painting in the before and after. Apart from the pupil and the iris, there isn't much difference anymore. And then we're going to do that for the upper and lower in the before. There's going to be quite a big difference. And then just look at the reference and squint. You can see a lot of this, and just dart your eyes back and forth. You can see a lot of the differences here, especially with the space between each lash. Where in the squinted reference, it just looks like a little fog of lashes. That's how you're supposed to be rendering it. Just a fog of detail. So the fog... The fog version of the texture is all that you should be concerned with. Okay, so for this piece right here, not only do you have to go darker as a whole, so be careful with eye studies, because you tend to give them the kind of attention and fervor that you would if it was a like a full illustration, but it's only eyes. You know, let's relax. It's just eyes. It's not a book cover. I mean it might be. But you don't want to over detail something that is going to be one aspect of a full illustration one day. So eyes are no longer the focal point in a character design. They are in a portrait, but not in a character design. Character design, illustration, a standing character of some kind in a background, jumping in the middle of the night. From rooftop to rooftop, the eyes are not the focal point. You have a whole world around them to be the focal point to inherit that importance in the storytelling. So you had a bunch of light underneath the eyelid where there should have been a bunch of shadow. And we're squinting our eyes now, and we can see a little missing, like, kind of trail of shadow for the lower eye. It's just that little dark circle starting out. And then there's this. You don't blur. Areas in shadow are blurred. Write that back to me and give me an answer for why that is. Why are areas in shadow blurred? What's the significance of something blurred? What's the significance of something not blurred? Something focused. Why is it so focused? Why can we see it? Get the blur tool and actually blur stuff in the shadow. Things in shadow are never sharp. Why? Why are things in shadow never sharp? Also, I hate the way you like formatted. God, I'm dying. I hate the way you formatted this, because I like when it's on the left and right. Less light being reflected, areas in shadow are blurred because there's no light. Light equals detail. No light equals less or no detail. Exactly. So they're blurred. Why are they blurred in relevance to us? Light equals clarity. Less light means less detail. You can only see details in light, so less light equals less detail. Excellent. So our eyes are weak. Things blur because our eyes can't see. There are some animals, I think, that can see pretty sharp images at night. because they have a different way of processing light. Whatever light is in the area, it kind of gets like efficiently processed or something. Whatever David Attenborough or whatever his name is told me on Netflix. But as much as I know about the animal kingdom, it's relevant to our class. More shadow equals less details because we cannot see them clearly without much light exposure. So look at what I'm doing with my smudge brush. Woo! And then there's also the required necessary level of blur in your depiction of the painting, because you're not doing a photo reference. Okay. I'm getting rid of that. And there's just some extra light around the eye. Again, this is a male eye, so it's hooded a lot. And then just a lot of this I'm doing with soft brush, because you pieced in so much stuff together with harsh edges that you forgot there is, again, that layer of softness in the way everything touches each other organically. The way different objects interact with each other is by layering. It's a really nice, soft, transparent layering of things together to make the eye. It's not going to be cut and dry every single time. I'm actually getting my smudge brush and smudging the lash line. Remember that thickness in the lash line? How the lash needs to be represented with a fog of texture. So if you guys, you kind of like the way I do with my studies, and you're wondering why your work does not capture what the reference has in it, it's because of that missing extra level of attention paid to the organic transition of shadow soft brush. And you'll see how it adds that kind of like smoke. And light has a texture. Light is textured. Yes, it's not bumpy with hairs on it, but light on the texture spectrum is on the far end at the softest thing in the world, which I guess it might be air. Air has a texture. I mean, it's so soft it's invisible, but it's visible-ish with a distance, like clouds, for instance, or something like that, like a gas. And then you got light at the end of the gases spectrum, which is just, it has a texture to it. If as an artist, those are the questions we ask, because it needs a soft brush. It has like this emanation to it, and that gradient, that particle speckle, that's the texture I'm talking about. And that's what the shadow reveals, the texture of the light source, right? It's silhouette. It reveals the shape of the light, like the light had a shadow. Not really, it was the object that had the shadow, but I'm getting a bit too poetic. But that's what will define you as a professional, how detailed you are, even when it comes to the role soft brush plays. And all of these changes, though they seem like magic, and the before and after has that difference in it, it was all soft brush creating that super layer of organic, that feel of the organic, that blurring and that weakness, that natural blur in the human eye as it sees an object, the natural blur of the periphery vision as the eye chooses one thing to look at. I'm still having trouble. Oh, Photoshop is a cow. Just dropping that value one more step, and then we'll take a look at the before and after. So look only here. Before, after. Okay, so that's what's going to get your work to read better without that beginner splotchiness. Yeah, this is a soft brush that is working with core shadows. We're casting shadows off the brow bone. We're not inventing our own little highlights underneath the eye. Why does this eye look more accurate than this one, even though we took away detail? And it's for the reasons, these weird little mysterious things that I just told you. It's the periphery vision, it's the blur in the eye, it's the focal point, it's the natural organic way things transition together. Skin is translucent and skin layered, and it all comes together to make something look realistic. It's magic. But no, it's just soft brush. Used properly, used with finesse. Getting rid of the extra detail you had here. You had all this detail at the start of the eyebrow and at the root of every single hair, and that's just messy depiction of texture. It's about detail relief, detail relief. So I'm just using my smudge brush, and I'm smudging in every other spot in the eyebrow. Zoom out. The area I just smudged looks like hair, doesn't it? Look, it looks like a bunch of hair. His is clean. I don't care about his. It's just a photo. This photo is useless to me in helping me depict something that feels natural, because this is unheard of. This is unnatural information represented in a picture. If you were standing in front of yourself in the mirror, you only see one part of yourself at a time, unless you took a picture. And then even in that picture, you see only one part of it at a time. That's how we paint. We paint as if we're looking at something with the naked eye. So we zoom out. This does more than this. Okay, so who's on the same page? Who's confused? All right, any questions at all? When do you decide to blend as opposed to soft brush? I blend with my smudge brush when it comes to textures. When it comes to core shadows, I use my soft brush. But everything is always low opacity. And none of this is possible. You don't use soft brush, you don't use smudge brush unless you have a very, very healthy foundation of block. Okay? You have all your stuff mapped out, you have all your ducks in a row, you have your geometry figured out, all of the spheres and cylinders and their natures that they're representing. So if it's the eyeball, it has to be perfectly curved, no weird little bumps here and there, no growths. Everything has to be perfect. And then we start smudging according to the anatomy or the shadow or the geometry in question. And you'll start to pick up more and more detail every time you paint. All right. It keeps happening even though I keep it at super low opacity. How do I avoid making paintings blotchy with soft brush after painting for a long time? You should not, that's the thing, you should not be using soft brush for a long time. I don't know if you guys have ever caught my time-lapse videos for my paintings, but if you were to actually measure the time I spent blocking to the time I spent with soft brush towards the end, blocking, I spend a lot more time. Sometimes I spend more time on soft brush because I don't like where the painting is going, so I'll go back and repaint the painting. And then that means I'm starting over, or just not blocking and doing everything with soft brush while keeping an eye out for my details and my edges and not undoing my edges. But the reason why you get that splotchy look if you spend painting with soft brush for too long is because you're using soft brush on medium size. Soft brush on medium size looks like this. It can only look splotchy. Soft brush does its job when it's big. So this isn't a traditional soft brush. This is my soft brush. It has texture and it doesn't have as wide a radius. But I hope I can show you guys. This is not the typical soft brush. It actually blocks when you're working with a small size. So I'll just use something like that. The reason why it's splotchy is because you're never really only painting the value you've selected. You're always somehow, I mean, this paint looks like it's ending here, but it's actually ending here because I know this is darker. And that's why things tend to look splotchy. And you'll shrink the brush thinking that you've cleaned it up, but you really haven't. We have this big old nasty medium color between these two colors, which should never have had a medium color in between them. And that's what soft brush does. It gives you a bunch of these medium colors everywhere. It makes all your edges really ugly to where you don't even have edges anymore. You just have splotch. That's basically what it means, is that you just have pools of soft brush values instead of confident edges that have been strategically blurred in relation to their role as the focal point, or beside the focal point, or periphery. I brought up the idea to my teachers buying Purchase Studio for all of our art classes. Thank you so much, Therese. Therese? How do I pronounce that? Therese? Don't use soft brush unless you're rack. No. Is there any way of buying your program in bulk? You do have to send an email. Yeah, send an email to Abudar with your question, and we'll be able to get back to you. I highly recommend checking out this direct tutorials on fabric to understand the steps between blocking shadows and soft brush. Thank you, Mango. Yeah, fabric studies are a great way to help transition you into a better instinct for when soft brush is necessary. So you got this big old block right here, and this is really, really defined soft brush. I don't know, did I do this? No, you did that. So this is a very, very soft transition here. There's also a massive block of soft brush right there that's missing. That's her eyebrow bone. That's a big anatomical requirement, and you missed that. Okay. And then we have the soft brush needed for non-shadow, so that build-up of flesh for that hooded eye, and then I follow that with a smudge brush, just because I like the texture of smudge brush. You still have these horrid lashes in the way that you never needed. So you have a bad relationship with hair. If you were my student and we had private sessions together, I would forbid you from drawing eyebrows and eyelashes. For like a good 10 sessions, I would not allow you to. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but it just depends on your response to them. But I would just not allow you to. Look at how you have only some highlight just on the outermost peak of the fat of the eyebrow, but you brought it all the way up there. So you have core shadow issues, you have texture issues, you have texture like in relation to hair, you have workflow issues. Maybe you're not blocking at all. Maybe you're just, I'm sorry for the term, digging around a little bit with a sharp little pencil brush at different sizes, and just hoping it looks good. Just following your instinct. You should not be at the mercy of your visual instinct. You should not be at the mercy of your artistic instinct. There should be a solid methodology to your application of paint on paper. And that has a lot to do with, and it's just repetitive. It's not something difficult. It's really, really solid theory. Block the geometry to attain the three-dimensional volume that is in all living things that are realistic and live in this natural world. And soft brush after, because all these things are organic and need to be blended because they're surrounded by flesh. The humans, anyway. You got such a beautiful little, radial shade for the eye socket, but that's missing. Really, really sharp cast shadow coming off the eyeball. Not as many splotches as you represented on the white of the eye, because again, that was your contrast. Popping its head in. This line is a lot more sharp and straight. She's kind of squinting. Okay. So a student who's digging around is a student who hopes that they will eventually draw something good. Who here is guilty of that? Put your hand up. You paint and paint and paint, and 8 hours later, you finally let yourself sleep, and then you wake up in the morning, keep hacking away at it like a virgin trying to undo a bra strap. And then at the end of the day, exhausted and sweaty and unsatisfied, like a virgin, you hate your art. Because the entire time you were at the mercy of what? Like your inspiration, whether or not something looked right to you, and that was it. You have to do enough studies where you have a solid game plan, you know, and that you can trust. I am here dedicating my life to telling you, delay the soft brush a little bit, but know when to use it. Block and make sure you have all the geometry intact. Do enough form studies so you have a better instinct for core shadow. Do not depend on texture because it's not going to help you. And the finesse that you're missing in your work is because you're not thinking about the delivery. And you need to prioritize different things in order to get the read, because things look realistic only because of the core shadow. And the core shadow, for some reason, is just this hated thing for students. They just don't, I can make it look better without one. I can pull it off without one. Oh, yeah. That just sounds like something a baby boomer would say, and we all don't like baby boomers around here. Alright, so I feel like this is a much larger body of light that the soft brush can pull off. I'm joking, all you baby boomers in my eye, I'm joking. You know, don't be like a baby boomer. A baby boomer would skip, you know, and paint only with soft brush and overdo the eyelashes. Don't be like a baby boomer. All of you guys, okay. Yeah, like a virgin painting for the very first time. Me when trying to get the proportions right. This don't look right carries on anyway. Yep. Yeah. That's something a boomer would say, and we hate I'm joking. I'm joking. So you can see why the eye is so big, like it's so big. And that's like, now that I'm painting it, we can really see that eye is big. And it's tiny little corrections, but they made the biggest difference to the painting. And it's the difference that you were seeing. You, the artist, know way better than any of the rest of us that these mistakes were there. You just didn't know what to do with them. And I hope now you do, but it was all in your workflow. Your result will never be good if your execution is clumsy. Alright, so look at that. It looks hacked, looks paint by numbers. Looks more realistic later because we've applied that texture. It's always an abstract class when I have to talk about the role of soft brush and why we do it. It's always a weird class. It's always so weird explaining it. I just feel weird when I'm trying to explain to you the difference between this and this. This here, look at this eye, and this. Because it's me telling you guys to use the tool that is dangerous, but at the same time telling you guys it's still dangerous, even though look at how amazing the changes are. And also because of all the weird abstract reasons why it looks good, and periphery and focus and all of that. And then also trying to figure out whether or not the student even blocked, and what other tools they used, and what it looks like when they use soft brush properly, and whether or not these are soft brush plus core shadow problems. It's always a weird class, and it's a weird topic, and art is weird, and being a teacher, art teacher is weird. But the before and after is why this is successful today, because it's shown us the difference. All right, even if you had 7 references that you were working from, the results should always look like this, not like this. And that's because you get a better idea of the texture you're going for. I'll do this next class. Because you're representing something organic. All right. So does anyone have any questions at all before I head out? If you guys want to submit stuff for critique hour, like today I looked at someone's work, I will do 14-day challenges next time. I will do 14 days because I have to go. I'm so sorry that I chose them. I was just, again, it's an abstract topic and it really takes it out of me. So I have, you guys can go to Reddit. And so go to estherback.com, click on the Reddit icon to join and submit your work for critique. Submit it under the right section category, And you can submit anything here except for niche stuff or fetish stuff or anime or something like that. If you're rendering and you're trying to get better at rendering and you submitted something that looks like you're trying to render, that's what's acceptable here. That is pretty much a good rule to follow. Good rule of thumb. If it looks like they're trying to render something, let's do it. If it looks like they're not trying to render, but it's not anime, that might be acceptable. It might be like a pencil animation for some like a anatomy study or something like that, or even just a cartoony anime. Cartoony animation, not anime animation. That's acceptable. But yeah, we're not really here to teach you how to draw cookie cutter anime. We're here to how to make something look great and presentable and expensive. Okay, so if you guys want to join as patrons, if everybody here joined as a patron today for $1, I would reach my goal very, very quickly. I would not need to announce Patreon in like 6 months. I have a feeling I'll still be announcing Patreon because it's a very slow trickle of incoming patrons, but it means the world that you guys are actually proactively going through the Patreon checkout and supporting me on Patreon. I'm currently not working with any kind of agency or anything like that with YouTube. YouTube has pretty much slowed down my channel. My videos are too long to support with monetization or anything like that. So I'm working directly only with patrons at the moment. If you guys like this class, if you guys are interested in keeping it, alive for a long, long time to come, for like the next 5-10 years, we're still doing this. It'd be great if you guys showed some support as watchers. Only a watcher. I'm not asking for anything higher. A watcher out of all of you is still an amazing amount and means the world and will change my life completely and make it a lot easier for me to show up to these classes every week. Thank you everyone for joining. Don't forget to read up. It's too late to join. I think you guys have less than a week to finish your Ghoulish character design lineup. Next Thursday will be the Halloween challenge due date. Ooh, Halloween. I'll try to play some cool Halloween music at the start of the class, and I'll make the event soon. But let your friends know. Maybe you guys want to have some art before your Halloween party or something, Eastern time, 5 p.m. Eastern time. But I'll see you guys, and I'll be announcing the Wizard Challenge. Damn it. I remembered Angry Santa again. It's because I'm seeing the Santa in my mind. Just like all angry and cute with his red cheeks and his Expecto Patronum or something. But I'll see you guys next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you everyone for coming. Bye guys.